Now, the president is going tit for tat on this whole nuclear rhetoric. Some say putting us potentially in harm's way when he ups the rhetoric himself. Senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, Rebecca Heinrichs, and all that. Rebecca, I know this president is where he is because of his tweets, because of his language, because of his bluntness and all. This isn't a Democratic thing or a Republican thing. I don't think it's wise for him to speak like this to a guy who's a certifiable nutcase in North Korea. I just think it ups the ante needlessly. What do you say?
Well, I readily admit it's uncomfortable. It's unsettling. I'm uncomfortable when any leader of any country talks about nuclear weapons seemingly flippantly. But I think what President Trump has been trying to do is to communicate that the United States isn't bluffing about our willingness to use force. I will say, to put this into some context, President Obama, President Bush made veiled threats about our willingness to use military force, the strength of our military to take care of North Korea. What's different about President Trump, of course, is that he's believable. And so, but that believability is necessary if you're going to have a credible threat towards North Korea. So it does seem to me to fit into his larger plan to have this pressure campaign. I understand why it makes people uncomfortable, but I think it's worth reminding folks that the real threat is the aggressor, and that's North Korea. That's Kim Jong-un and North Korea.
I don't know. It has a feel of Beavis and Butthead, though, to me. Like, comparing button sizes and all the rest. And I just worry, is this the direction in which we want to go? Is this, if we had, God forbid, another Cuban Missile Crisis type deal, would that be the way we would want to start it? How do you tamp things down, or is that even a goal here?
Well, I do think that at some point here, you want an off-ramp. And by that, I mean you want the North Koreans. The goal here is to coerce Kim and North Korea to relinquish his nuclear weapons. That doesn't seem to be happening. That doesn't seem to be working. Recently, there was reports that China is still selling oil to North Korea, and you can't shoot missiles without oil. You need fuel. And so it looks like the Chinese are not helping the United States. So we are sort of moving down towards this very precarious path towards military force, I'm afraid. And so you do want to have an off-ramp so that the North Koreans, if they do decide to come to the table and say, okay, let's talk about our nuclear program, you want to let that happen. And so, if I were advising the president, I would say at some point you're going to have to start moving in that direction. But I do think that the North Koreans and the Chinese have got to understand that this administration is not bluffing. I've spoken with General McMaster about this subject, and he's not bluffing. And so the
when you
sooner
say
the
he's
Chinese,
not bluffing, that he's seriously considering war options?
I do believe that, Neil. I believe
and what would they include?
Well, I believe that, I don't think that the United States would do anything first preemptively. I do think that it would be in response to what the United States understands.
Let's say they launch a missile, right? And we would, in response, try to shoot it down. Is that an act of war?
It's certainly not an act of war if you're defending yourself or your allies. I understand that people continue to make that argument that's preposterous. We have missile defenses in place. Right. If the missile actually goes through the envelope, they call it, through the area in which the missile defense systems are designed to defend against, I believe that the Japanese and the United States is willing to intercept that missile if it's headed towards a dangerous area, if it's headed towards innocent civilians. I believe that if the North Koreans test an actual nuclear weapon on a missile, that would cross a line. If they were to shoot a missile towards Guam, that would cross a line. And this is my own analysis. I think that there are lines that the administration is not willing to talk about or draw. But if that should happen, I do believe that the United States military is in place to respond, and it would not be a pinprick. It would be overwhelming. And the faster the Chinese and the North Koreans can understand that this is a serious option and this is not just, threats that are meaningless, the quicker we can resolve this without using force.
All right. Well, watch closely, Rebecca. Good seeing you again. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Neil.